Welcome to the LGBTQ New Americans Oral History Project. My name is Wilfredo Hernandez, and I'm the Arts and Culture Group Leader here at the Brooklyn Community Pride Center. And I'm with
Jackie Adashkin, Public Affairs Director for Immigration Equality.
And today is Sunday, June 4th, 2017, and we are here with
Denise.
And where are you today, Denise?
I'm at the downtown Brooklyn Community Pride Center, downtown Brooklyn.
Thank you for being here.
And I'm happy to be here.
Welcome.
We're happy to have you here. So, Denise, can you tell us where you grew up?
I grew up in beautiful Trinidad and Tobago.
And what was that like for you?
Well, I grew up in a rural village, and whilst my childhood may have been littered with bouts of happiness, there was more unhappiness as opposed to having what you would consider a normal childhood. I was raised by my paternal grandparents, and I met my mother for the first time when I was 17.
And what was that meeting like?
Emotional. I'd always wondered what she looked like, what she sounded like. I had, in my imagination, imagined that she had the glamorous looks of Joan Collins and she had the persona of a diva, because the stories that I had heard about her from my relatives was that she was somewhat of a lady of the night. I never knew much about her, and whatever little I knew was inculcated in my mind that she wasn't a good person. So meeting her was filled with emotion, and most of it was anger.
Well, what types of things did you like to do when you were growing up, like for fun?
Oh, well, growing up with my grandmom, I started cooking at the age of 9. As a child, I always liked simple things. As an adult now, I can reflect upon my childhood and say that, having material things didn't matter to me. We grew up in abject poverty. It was a large family, extended. I had lots of cousins, and and to coin a phrase, being the bastard child, I was subjected to quite a bit of taunts, ridicule. Sometimes it became physical, and then it led into sexual abuse. I was abused by 7 of my older cousins, from a young age of 7. So, fun. There wasn't much time to have fun, but I do recall sitting here talking with you. There is a place in the back of my grandparents' property where you will travel to a trail and cross a river. It's a stream compared to rivers. It's a stream. But you would get into this huge field, and on a Sunday evening, from a very early age, I would find myself retreating to that open field and just laying on the grass and wondering and having emotions about, what my life would be, and, what the outside world looks like.
What places did you think you might end up going to? Did you ever think that you would end up traveling here?
No, I never dreamed that I would go to New York, or even go to London, but I knew that I had to get out. One of my grandmother's messages to me was, if you want to get out of living poor, you have to focus on your studies. And I may not have been a brilliant student, but I was studious. So, despite being sexually abused and being taunted and having health issues, because growing up as a child, I had eczemas, and during the months of June to December, my skin would literally be covered with eczemas, and I was That's another part of it. I was scorned. And you can't blame the people for looking at you with these eczemas on your skin, on your body, and not feeling repulsed. So, um, yeah, that was part of my growing up process as well.
So when did you decide that you were going to actually come to the US?
Um, that's taking it rather quickly because I graduated high school and I I knew that I had to find work. So eventually I found um, I worked for several small private like supermarket doing supermarket jobs and stuff, but I never fitted in because of my predisposition to being effeminate. Um, and coming from a society that frowned upon, and frown is putting it mildly, um, being frowned upon effeminate mannerisms by a male, you found that there wasn't much that you could have done. Um, and I I learned to adapt, and in that adaptation, I found myself using my body to sometimes get what I want. Um, I realized that my cousins, even though they still had sex with me, I found that they would have had to earn it. And I'm saying this because this is my truth. Um, so I got a job. I went to training with the government of Trinidad and Tobago in 1992. I started training as an enrolled nursing assistant, and I completed the training in 1994. I worked in a mental health institution, and to me it was just the starting of my career, the beginning of my career. And in 1996 or thereabouts, my uncle decided that he was going to take my grandmom and take care of her because they felt that since I was working shift and I wasn't giving her sufficient attention, they decided to take her. One of the more devastating times in my life because I had literally grown up with her. I knew no other mother. She provided everything for me, and it was difficult. In 2004, I decided that I wanted to, that I had to. It wasn't about wanted anymore. I had moved out of the village that I grew up in, and I was living on my own. And at that time, I had become more in touch with my trans identity. It was no longer a state of confusion. It wasn't any longer a state of being unaware. I knew that I was trans. I had done sufficient research on it. It's my identity. It wasn't about questioning if I'm gay or not. It wasn't about sex. For me, it was a definitive rule that I am a woman. And to coin the phrase that I was born in the wrong body, I wasn't willing to accept that. And I will not accept that. I am who I am, and I identify as Denise because this is me. This is not a figment of my imagination or something that I can look back on 10 years away or 10 years back and say, I'm sorry, that is not me. This is who I am. This is where I go from here. So I was living alone, and I was renting a small apartment, and I had neighbors. My neighbors, they were not the friendly type. I worked in an emergency center in Chaguanas, Trinidad, and I was subjected to a lot of ridicule. I wasn't dressing to go to work. It was hard for me. I couldn't. Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean as a whole, we are so involved in a homophobic culture or transphobic culture that they would not recognize a trans person coming into work in a government institution. You would be ridiculed. You will be torn apart. So I had to force myself every day to get up, put on my face, and get out there and work, all the while knowing part of my of who I am, the essence of who I am, is not being met. So in private, I would be myself, and in my own. I had a few friends that obviously accepted me for who I was, and amongst each other we would share our real identities. And on one such evening in February of 2004, um, I had gone to a party, a friend's birthday, and I had worn a black skirt, a long black skirt, and a fitted bodice. I wasn't as big as I am now. Age has certainly gotten me on the chunkier side. So I had gone to a party. I had a couple drinks, and I came home in the morning, at the morning time, like around 2 in the morning, and there they were playing outside. My neighbors, they were playing cards. It was a ritual for them. On a weekend, they will sit outside their house. They will drink. They will throw things and stones on my apartment, on the roof of my apartment. They would harass me because they knew. And I was walking past them. I was a bit inebriated, but not totally. And they yelled out to me, started calling me names, and I answered. I did. I responded. You have to understand that part of who I am, I may not be able to fight, because I'm not a fighting person, but I can use my mouth. I can use my voice to respond, and I did that. And this was the first time that I was actually answering them back, so to speak, amidst taunts of bulla, which is basically a derogatory term, or macome man, or faggot. They were taunting me, and I responded, and they all rushed at me. At the side of my apartment, there was a drain that ran parallel, and so they scuffled with me. It was 6 of them. There was 1 woman, 5 guys, and they beat the shit out of me. And when they turned to walk away, actually the irony of it is one of the guys, not the woman, but one of the guys said, "Leave him alone now." An older gentleman. I can't recall his name, but I know his face. And he had said, "Leave him alone now." And I was startled. My skirt was torn to shreds. Jewelry was somewhere in the drain. I was in the drain. And the drain was filthy, so, I had to climb out of the drain, get out of the drain, and got into my apartment. But before they left me, one of the gentlemen said, "If you go and report it to the police, you could go to the police." His words were, you can report it to the police, but we'll burn you and the house down. So that in itself was a threat against my safety. I knew whether or not they would have done it. It was still a question in my mind. But I knew that I had to, at that point in time, I knew I had to leave there. I worked in the same unit that I checked myself into. One of the physicians there, he advised me to go to the doctor. And, sorry, not to go to the doctor, to go to the police, to report this to the police. And I was hesitant. But I did, because, I was swollen. My eyes were swollen. I was peeing blood. My body was swollen. It was horrible. And I went to the police, and one of the policemen who knew me, um, he used a derogatory term. He called me a bulla, go on from here, which is chasing me away. And I looked for other support from other policemen and women who were there. No one said anything. I was chased away from the police station as a common dog, and I went home. I called a friend who was living in New York, and I had obtained a visa in 2003. So I called that friend because I had visited her in October, and I told her, I said, this is what has happened. And she said to me, you need to leave there. And she said, why don't you come up here? At least, do something. The original plan was that I was going to come up to New York, and I was going to find a job and work for 6 months and then return. It was never my intention to overstay my visa. Part of the reasoning for that is that I was working for very little money, and if I had to move out of where I was living, I would have had to get money to get a new apartment. So the plan was that I would come and work for some US dollars, and then I would go back. That was the plan. A month later, on March 23rd, 2004, I boarded a flight and I left Trinidad. I got no pay leave from my job, and I was supposed to have stayed for 6 months. In May of 2004, a friend who lived close by to where I was previously living, I contacted her, and she told me that, it'll make no sense. It doesn't make any sense in you returning to the apartment, to Trinidad, because they burned down your apartment last week. So whatever I had in the apartment, which wasn't much, but it was my home, and that was it. I knew then and then that the money that I had saved up until May would not have helped me to go back, to return to Trinidad and find somewhere to live and for me to be happy. So that, with the constraints of I'm living in New York, and even though I didn't go many places at that point in time, I knew that somehow this is where I belonged. I considered the ramifications of staying here undocumented. My friend and I discussed it at length, and I decided to take a chance on it. And that is how I ended up in New York.
And what was it like to be in New York when you got here?
At first, New York intimidated me. Manhattan intimidated me. Tall buildings, the people, the coldness of it. Because I grew up, even though I grew up in a constrained environment, basically you knew everyone in the village, and everyone knew you. And whether they treated you bad or indifferent, you had some sort of a community. This was completely different. But I soon became a New Yorker. And I started looking for work. I was working, but I started trying to find other jobs that would help me to make more money. And I started being myself. I knew that I didn't have to hide anymore my identity. But then the fear now of having overstayed my visa and hearing stories of deportation, even at that time in 2004, it somehow, and hearing stories from other immigrants who would tell you, undocumented, well, you can't do this, you can't open a bank account, and you have to be careful if you see a vehicle passing up and down the street where you're living. Those black vehicles, they are sometimes ICE, and ICE could come into your house and knock on your door at 6 o'clock in the morning. And you found that the fear of existing in Trinidad because of who you are, it's now transferred into another type of fear. And this time it's a fear that, coupled with being found and deported. So you're going to be deported back to where you came from, where you ran from. I mean, have you ever been in such agony that you're afraid to breathe? So for me, it was in a constant state of waiting to exhale. So I lived like that from 2004. And it wasn't easy. I would hide from police vehicles. I would refuse to take the Long Island Railroad if I see a policeman on the Long Island Railroad. I was fortunate enough to get a job right here in Brooklyn, up on Flatbush Avenue, a West Indian restaurant. Great people. They treated me as a part of something that was much bigger than I am. It had its limitation because within the environment there was some sort of a transphobia, homophobia. But for me, the management, they made it easy for me, I must say. They accepted me, and to today, I still have a wonderful relationship with them. So I worked in that environment. I continued to exist hiding. But it was better than not being being my true self. I would go out at night, started going out to parties, and I had no problems. I was myself. I was able to express internally, externally, emotionally, physically who I am, and that to me was worth the sacrifice. I didn't really commingle with other Caribbean immigrants and other Caribbean trans people because I felt that if I am singular, there's a possibility that my singularity will not be an opening for contention or for people, immigration, ICE, and whomever to find us. So I stayed by myself, but I had friends and I would go off. They knew very little about me. People knew very little about me. And in 2010, I went to New York City Pride. And I found, I saw immigration equality, and they had a huge contingent. I didn't know much about what could happen. As a matter of fact, at that time, I was saving up money. I was living alone in an apartment in Wyandanch, New York. And I was saving up money to give to a woman to get married to me. Initially, she said $10,000, but she wanted $5,000 at first, upfront. And then over the period of time until I would have gotten my green card and my social, I would have had to pay her the next $5,000. Needless to say, she took $5,000 off me and she went to North Carolina and never returned. So then that was off. And then, so when I saw immigration equality, a friend and I had gone to Pride, and I got a card. And the very next day after Pride, or maybe 2 days later, I called, and a young gentleman answered. Well, he turned out to be Steven Silva, he answered the phone, and I said to him, I have a friend who is not legal, and I saw your organization, and Stephen was nice enough, and he said we would like you to come in and let the friend come in. Can't remember the exact verbatim, but I found myself at Immigration Equality in 2010, and they put me to speak to a paralegal who took my story, and I didn't hear from him for like 3 weeks. And eventually, when I contacted him, he says, "Listen, Denise, I'm sorry, but you've been in the country since 2004. You have overstayed your time. It would not be, we would not be able to take your case on. And even if we were to take your case, there's a likelihood that they will put you in removal proceedings because you don't have any grounds for staying in the country and stuff." After I'd relived my past in writing my story, I was disappointed. And then a few weeks later, Stephen called me back, and he said, "We would like to meet with you. Aaron would like to meet with you." And I sat. Aaron made no promises, but what he did say to me, he said, "Listen, we're going to fight it. And even if you were to be put into removal proceedings, it's not going to happen just like that. It's not going to happen right away. But I am willing." He said the words, "I am willing to take on your case. I'm not making any promises, but we're going to try." And I said, "Okay." Stephen helped me to go over my story again, talk about my life, write it. It was hard reliving my past. And in 2011, I got an appointment to, at least, it was a start. At the same time, I was having problems where I was working. And this is not the restaurant that I was working at, but another job. And I had to move down to Maryland. And it was a blessing in disguise, because in New York, I had to wait a long time for the appointment. And I moved down to Maryland to stay at a cousin's house, and I transferred my case. Aaron said it's not a problem. He says, "We have an affiliate in Maryland, in DC. We'll take your case, and I will come and I will represent you." And he did. I was put in removal proceedings. It was denied. At the interview, I was denied. On what grounds? I don't know. But I felt like I had suffered another blow. At that time, I was having challenges with my health, having suffered a heart attack in 2009, not having insurance. So I had a heart attack in 2009, November 23rd, 2009. And I checked myself out of the hospital after the procedure was done the following day. I didn't have any medication, so 7 months later, I had another heart attack. So I was not taking medication. I didn't have insurance. I didn't have anywhere to really live. I was staying at my cousin's in Maryland. It wasn't an ideal setting. And I wasn't working whilst I was in Maryland. It was hard. And when I got denied, I felt I'd suffered another blow. I remember taking the bus to go back to my cousin's place, and I'm feeling, I just want to die. I've had enough. I've had this struggle all my life, and putting aside other people's struggle, when you think of only yourself in this setting, you feel as though the world has dealt you a very cruel blow, and you're ready to resign. You're ready to go. I don't know what kept me going. Maybe it was a inner strength to fight. Maybe it was the fact that I was a coward, that I didn't want to do anything to harm myself. But I still survived. I continued. Aaron told me that they will appeal the case. We had a backup plan, and we appealed the case. It took us in 2014, October 21st, 2014. After a long wait, I walked into the courts, the immigration courts in Maryland, and it took but all 5 minutes. The immigration judge asked the state representative, attorney, do you have any objections to this young lady having being granted immigration status and asylum? And she said no. And with that, I exhaled. Nothing had happened then, but everything had happened at that same time. Because here it is, I could start over. Despite all that has happened and all that I've been through, somebody saw something in me, and it was like I'm being given a second chance. I'm not religious. I'm not even spiritual, but I felt that whatever it was out there, there was something good that happened to me that day. And I moved back up to New York. And then the second phase of my journey begins.
So what have you been doing since then?
Well, I moved back to New York into uncertainty, but I was certain of one thing, that I now have my asylum. I now have asylum. I can get work authorization. I still had the support of immigration equality. It wasn't easy navigating the system because there were at times confusion as to what is taking place. For example, I did not get an I-94 card. It took us almost 2 years after I got my asylum to get the I-94. I got my authorization, my work authorization card 2 months later. But during that 2 months, I had nowhere to live, so I found myself sleeping in train stations. 63rd train, 66 on Lexington, the 63rd Street station was my home for a short time. Jamaica station, and the 179th Hillside Street station was my home. Washington Square was where I met a guy by the name of Jason. He was a street person, but he was kind. I don't know if you call it kind, but he taught me to prostitute myself. Well, I had to relearn again, I should say. And I would prostitute myself just to get money to buy food. And in 2014, February of 2014, a friend of mine, she called me. I take that back. 2015, a friend of mine called me. I had sent her an email and we had reconnected. She lived in Long Island. And she called me and she said, listen, you've screwed up at times with me, and this is your last chance. I don't think that I would want anyone else to look after my father than you. So I want you to pack your bags, whatever you have, and meet me in Mineola train station. And it was from there that my life, as I know it now, made a turn for the better. I took care of her father. He was a Holocaust survivor. He was an engineer, a great man. He accepted me into his house. I lived in with him. I took care of him. And he accepted me just the way I was. He knew my story, his daughter. She knew everything. And I became a part of something that was much bigger than I was, something that I've always wanted, to get a sense of belonging. You don't know this, Jackie, but one of the reasons why I still stay in contact so close with immigration equality and I just get encouragement, it's because to me, immigration equality wasn't just or isn't just an organization that helped me. It's an organization that gave me a second lease on life. And I've said it on many occasions. I've said it to the attorneys. I've said it to staff. I will forever be grateful and eternally grateful to immigration equality and especially to Aaron for giving me that second chance. So they're more my family than I've ever known. They're more family than I've ever known. And I lived in one of the fanciest places out in Queens with this guy that I was looking after. And his daughter's family, his family became my family. To this day, I'm still there. I'm still in their family. I'm still their Denise. Unfortunately, he passed in 2015. I'm sorry, I just...
Okay.
But I found another form of employment. I started taking care of another guy, and I was honored by immigration equality in their shining light. I was able to stand at the Safe Haven Award ceremony and give my stories. And still I didn't feel that I was giving back much. But a couple months ago, it was small, but it's a big feat for me. Because from a country that has taken me into their arms, it may not be a perfect scenario. Life isn't perfect. I'm not looking for perfection. I just want to belong. I just want to feel safe. I just want to breathe free. I want to exhale. I want to be able to exhale. I don't want to have to run when I see a police car or be afraid at all. I'm not a criminal. I just happen to be trans. And I make no excuses for it. This is who I am. So I found employment at a company, Rite Aid. I have started working at Rite Aid. And if ever you were to come to my apartment, I have one of the best apartments places that I've ever lived, because I have done it myself. It may not be a castle, it may not be a city apartment, but it's mine. I pay my rent. I've been living there for the past 2 years. Um, and my greatest accomplishment so far, believe it or not, is being able to pay taxes. From a country that has given me so much, a new lease on life, nothing made me feel such joy was to be able to actually see my pay stub and know that I am contributing back to what they have given me. That's my journey so far. I'm here now.
So, what do you like to do for fun nowadays?
I still cook. I love cooking. I've always liked cooking. I've matured, so I've learned to enjoy my own company. So if I'm not at the library studying because I don't have a computer, but that will happen. So if I'm not at the library studying for my certified nursing assistance exam, I am not far from where I live. There is a park, so I go walking. And that's it. I live a pretty simple, after all that I've been through with all the drama and all the excitement, all I can ask for now is simplicity. And that's where I am. I am at peace.
So, a theme in this interview process has been cooking, and we like to know, what is your favorite dish to make?
Someone asked me recently, what's my signature dish? I don't have a signature dish. And I'm not being boastful, but I can cook almost anything, and it tastes damn good. Because as my grandmother said, when you cook with love, it tastes the best. I just love when I cook. I give to my friends. I have a few friends. I have a bouquet of friends, and I give to them, and I just enjoy the compliments. And I even tell them that, pardon me, I even tell them that if even they don't like it, I want the comments as well, the negatives, because for me, I would learn from it. So that's my journey so far. That's where I am right now. I didn't think that I would be here. I remember times I would ride the subway, and I remember one particular Friday evening. It was a Memorial weekend evening, Friday, and everybody was hustling off to go into their destinations. And here it is. I had nowhere to stay, and I sat at the Long Island Railroad station in Jamaica. I knew I was smelling filthy, and I had to raise myself up to walk away from the tracks, because that was one of my lowest times, and I said to myself, you should just end it all. What stopped me was the fear of the pain of being hit by the train. But I wanted to die. At that point in time, it was one of my lowest points. My obituary will have probably meant nothing, because here it is, homeless person throws themselves, commits suicide on the Long Island Railroad. I think now my story begins again. Where I go from here, it's all on me. I've been given the tools. Immigration equality has given me a lease on life. Organizations like these, who are documenting the journey of Caribbean migrants, migrants on a whole, immigrants, undocumented. Sometimes it's not easy hearing these stories. Some stories differ, but they have a common thread, and that thread is the need to be accepted, the need to feel belonged, the need to feel safe. And I think America provides that, not just to undocumented trans people, but to the immigrant population as a whole. And in today's heated political debate, we are being faced with a lot of negativity, and that is saying it mildly, where undocumented immigrants are being castigated as the felons. But for me, it's not about the immigrants, it's about what society has done and the role that society has played or plays in causing this nasty rhetoric to perpetuate itself. I am not a Democrat nor Republican. I wouldn't even say that I'm independent. One day I hope that I can choose, because hopefully I'll be able to get the right to vote. But I believe that everybody deserves a chance. And of course, we have individuals in the midst of us, gay, straight, trans, whatever, Mexican, Ecuadorian, Filipino, Russian, Trini. There are many of us who are like bad apples. That doesn't mean to say that everyone should be bunched together in that same group. I know of a few people who are undocumented now that are afraid, and it's concerning. I wish there was more that I could do, that we can all do, but unfortunately, some of us are feeling the brunt of an ugly rhetoric that is causing people like me and even undocumented immigrants to go deep in the shadows of hiding. And if you think that I was hiding, if I was to think that I was hiding, then I can only imagine how they are feeling when they are hiding. My job where I work, I see now, you can tell, because I've been there. Not only as a trans person, but as an undocumented immigrant, and I see them. I can identify, without they saying anything. I can identify. I see the cowering faces, the fear on individuals' faces when they come. That's concerning. That's scary. This is my story. A low life in high heels.
Definitely not a low life. Is there anything else that you want people to know about you?
My story isn't over yet. I continue to write, but from here on upward, it's only good things.
Is there anything else you want to add to the record?
No, not at this point. But you haven't heard the last of me.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Denise.